We're heading into week 6 of minor league cricket, and there's plenty of cricket news all around the USA. Major League Cricket broke ground this week on their biggest stadium project to date. Grand Prairie's new venue, formerly Air Hogs Stadium, is undertaking a $20 million renovation in order to make it suitable for international and Major League Cricket. When completed, the stadium will have 7,000 permanent seats, 1,000 club seats, and be able to support 15,000 fans for large events. The project should wrap up by spring of 2023. USA Cricket's Women's Pathway program continues with the regionals leg this week. Regional teams from the East, West, Southwest, and Central have converged under the tutelage of USA head coach Shiv Chandrapal. Following the regionals, a West team and an East team will be selected to face off in the national championship, also to be held at Moosa Stadium from August 1st through the 3rd. Regional games can be watched on USA Cricket's YouTube channel. Minor League Cricket's own Youth National Championship is also in full swing at the Prairie View Cricket Complex. Minor League's Atlantic Conference has sent 5 teams, and the Pacific Conference has sent 6 teams to compete for a place in Friday's championship final. Games can be watched on the Major League Cricket Network on YouTube. The Seattle Thunderbolts dazzled fans last weekend with the launch of their new beautiful turf ground at Tollgate Farms. The gorgeous scenery previews a promising future for the Thunderbolts and cricket in the region. Finally, Moosa Stadium was the host of last week's Houston Cricket Festival, where local volunteers guided newcomers through their introduction to the sport with some Cricket 101. This week, the Philadelphians will be hosting their own Philadelphia Summer Cricket Festival, and I'll be lucky enough to be on hand to check it out. Week 5 featured some interesting upsets across the league, but did those upsets really alter the playoff picture? I've got Tom Nielsen with me today to discuss the playoff chances around the league. Tom, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Nate.
Yeah, it's always great talking to you about this stuff. We chat a lot in a Discord group about what's going on in the league, the stats, and one of the favorite things to look at is the chances that the teams have of advancing in the playoffs, the likelihood. So let's talk a little bit first about the East, and we are 5 weeks in right now, and everything already looks kind of settled in the East. Philly has a long shot chance, but let's talk about that division first.
Yeah. Like you said, Yorkers and Stallions, they've got a pretty sizable lead in the standings, both on points and net run rate. Philly is probably the team that's most likely, has a chance of catching them at least. So they're on 8 points from their 8 matches. The one, it's sort of a double-edged sword for Philly. They've got 2 matches left each against the Stallions and the Yorkers. So in some ways they control their own destiny a little bit. They've got a chance to make up ground on the leaders, but of course that also means it's a really difficult schedule for them. So, and they have quite a bit of a net run rate disadvantage on those teams. So a lottery results would have to go their way. My model's given them about a 4% chance to make the playoffs. So it's not 0, they're still in it, still something to play for. But certainly a bit of a long shot after the Stallions and the Yorkers there.
Yeah, they would have wanted to sweep DC this past weekend. On paper, it looks like they probably should have done that, especially because of how poor DC's batting was last weekend. Where I don't think they scored over 110 runs.
Yeah. The Philly DC split, that's obviously the best thing that could happen for the Yorkers and Stallions at the top, because DC's they're not entirely out of it. They're on 6 points from their 8 matches, so even more of an uphill climb than Philly. But DC, they're a decent team. They've got one of the best bowling attacks in the league. So
sure.
In another universe, they maybe could have challenged for the playoffs. But like you said, just batting is a little weak. Maybe if they had Jasker Malhotra for a full season, that could have made a difference. But they're outside. And actually, the model actually likes DC quite a bit. The model has DC as the 3rd best team in the division. But again, standings are not falling their way so far.
The New England Eagles actually upset the Yorkers, the first place Yorkers this past weekend, and the Yorkers remained in first place. But yeah, the Yorkers this year look fantastic, and according to your model, they have a 96% chance of advancing to the playoffs. Realistically, I think it's it may as well be 100% chance.
Both of them and the Stallions are up in that 95-96% range, and but ultimately the East is a really uncertain division. Like you said, New England upsetting a top team just last week. It's not like every game is entirely a coin flip, but it's not that far off. It feels like every game is not much more than, 60-40, 70-30 either way. So,
Right.
yeah, it's really, again, Yorker Stallions with that advantage in the standings are going to be hard to catch, but not over. There's this is sort of like, to me, this is kind of like the chaos division in minor league cricket. Despite it being like more or less decided, it's game in,
Right.
game out. It's really hard to say what's going to happen in this division.
Well, that's true. Yeah, like you said, game in, game out looks a lot different than the standings somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Eagles have really turned it on lately. New England Eagles, they've been a pretty solid team recently. I don't think anybody's going to look at them and think they're going to be an easy win at this point. The Cavaliers, they started the season so poorly, but they're much better than their record. So I think
Yeah.
the rest of this season is, like you said, it's a chaos. This table could look no different than it is right now, and the top two teams could win half of the rest of their games.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's who knows what's going to happen, but yeah.
It's the only division in the league where that's the case, where the leaders kind of have such a cushion that they could really kind of play poorly and still manage to skate into the playoffs. So next up is the South Division, only 5 teams this season. We had unfortunately the Morrisville Raptors game. They were canceled last weekend due to COVID in the Fort Lauderdale's Lions team setup. So they will probably make those games up, I'm hearing. But I think they might actually make them up in Florida, which is bad news for the Raptors. You have them with a 24% chance of advancing, and that's got to be due to the dominance of the Lightning and the Fire right now. And they're winning pretty much every game they should win, and they fared and the Lightning fared well against the Eastern teams here in Morrisville a few weeks back. What does that look like to you?
Yep. Yeah. Like you said, the Fire and the Lightning, they've got a pretty good cushion in the standings. If Morrisville had been able to play and swept, Fort Lauderdale this past weekend, that would have brought them, I think, even in the standings with the Fire. Probably would have bumped them up to something like a 50% chance to get into the playoffs. So yeah, Morrisville, it's kind of an interesting schedule because they might get a lot of Florida teams next weekend, and then they end the season with 5 against the Atlanta team. So really hoping, from a neutral perspective, I know you're not quite neutral, really hoping for some high drama going into the last weeks at Morrisville, get that Morrisville magic going again. So yeah, they really have to take care of business against Florida, and frankly, it's almost like they're playing against the rain too. There's a lot of weather issues in the South, and they've got to get these games played, and they got to rack up the points. So they really can't afford more than one no result against these Florida teams. They've got to get the job done, and they'll be back in the race. But again, really excited to see at the end of the year, how Morrisville will stack up directly against the Atlanta teams.
Well, the Lightning themselves have their future in their hands. They do play 2 games against Atlanta, so they could slip into that first place spot. You have them at a 31% chance of getting into the first place spot. So if they sweep them and then they sweep the Raptors and beat the Galaxy, which they haven't had any problems with really yet, they could be the first place team. They play the Raptors 3 times from now on. So the Raptors actually have, they have a chance to push the Lightning out of the playoffs if they sweep them. And meanwhile, the Atlanta Fire, they play obviously the Atlanta Lightning twice, and they play the Raptors 2 times, and then they have 2 against the Fort Lauderdale and 1 against Orlando. It looks like to me the Fire have the easiest road here from here on, and it's only simply because they play Florida teams 3 times who haven't been strong in the tournament, who haven't been consistently strong in the tournament. They've had their days. But you have both of the Florida teams at a 0% chance of making the playoffs, whereas only one East team had a 0% chance of making the playoffs. So yeah, it's there's no chance for them. They can just play spoiler. So if those three Florida teams do stand up and give the Fire a hard time, that could create some really interesting cricket throughout
For
the
sure.
division. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And, it's almost like when you're chasing, it's like scoreboard pressure for Morrisville. They do have the games left against Florida teams, assuming they can play against Fort Lauderdale. But, they got to get the job done. And the Fire and the Lightning, they have a pretty sizable net run rate advantage. They're up around 2 for net run rate, and Morrisville's pretty even. So Morrisville might have to get them on points. A tie might not be good enough, depending on the scale of the victories they would need to even get into second place. But certainly looking a definite advantage for the Fire and the Lightning, but wouldn't count Morrisville out yet.
Right. It's the Morrisville Raptors do, if they win out, then their chances go through the ceiling of making the playoffs, because they will have beaten.
They'll be virtually assured at that point. Yeah.
Right. They'll be right. They have what, five of their 5 of their 9 games are against teams ahead of them in the standings. So if they win out, then they're absolutely assured of a spot.
Yep.
But let's get now into the Pacific Conference, where we've got both of these divisions, some very interesting stuff. You have a front runner at the top who pretty much in the West, 100% chance that the Silicon Valley Strikers, they basically are in the playoffs. And then you have the East Bay Blazers versus the Seattle Thunderbolts. We all expected it to come down to one of 3 other teams for that spot: the Golden State Grizzlies, the Thunderbolts, and the Blazers. The Grizzlies, very disappointing this year. They only have a 3% chance. But it's great to see the Thunderbolts with a 45% chance to advance compared to East Bay Blazers with a 52% chance to advance. That's exciting. We kind of predicted that. It's always fun when, of course, we're going to talk about it more when we kind of predict something and it ends up going that way. But but yeah, it's great to see what they've been able to do with their team this season. And then they made these strides in the off season,
Yeah. Seattle's been really fun to watch this year. A tricky weekend last weekend. Nobody's really going to fault you for losing 2 against Silicon Valley. They really could have taken hold of that second spot in the playoffs with one win there. But yeah, really great team. Again, I said it earlier with the DC Hawks. But alongside the DC Hawks, this might be the best bowling attack in the league. Some really strong names that I know we'll talk about later. But yeah, with right in there with East Bay, they've got same exact record, really basically the same exact net run rate. So it should be a fierce fight to the rest of the year. East Bay, you said a slight advantage into whether they'll get into the playoff spot. They've got 3 matches left against the Southern California teams, and Seattle just has 2. But yeah, really interesting end of the season poised here for the Western Division.
Well, this is an example of where the remaining schedule makes a really big difference in your formula, because we have the Thunderbolts with a better net run rate, just barely, than the East Bay Blazers. I mean, that's the type of a run rate advantage that can be made up in like a really, really good over. But but yeah, it's they have a 45% chance of getting second place, whereas East Bay has a 50% chance of making second place. So you can see how those weaker Southern California teams, are affecting the formula there.
Yeah, for sure. And those aren't gimme games. Certainly,
No.
they're at the bottom of the division, right? They're a little like the Florida teams in the South, but they can win. I mean, these teams have registered wins this year. Last year they played spoiler a little bit, so
right.
Still got to get the job done. But yeah, the big thing, Seattle, they've got 2 against Golden State, like you said, struggled a little bit this year. But full strength, that's a really challenging matchup for Seattle. So that's probably what's going to make or break their season if they take care of business there. East Bay still has to go up against Silicon Valley once. I wouldn't want to be East Bay having to play them. Hard to imagine Silicon Valley losing a game at this point. But just really, really important matches coming up in this division. Going to be a really exciting finish.
Right, and Silicon Valley Strikers, they get such a boost from their top order, which has been phenomenal all season long. We haven't really seen much of Rahul Jarawala on that team, which is really interesting. He helped guide that. He helped take them to the finals last year, and he hasn't been opening batting this year, which is really strange to me, especially because they do seem like they have seemed like they are a good distance better than the other teams in the division. Somehow last year at this time they were all neck and neck. The three Bay Area teams. It was hard to pick which one was better because there were ebbs and flows of the season where each one of them for a 3-week span looked like the best team. But all season the Strikers have looked like the best team in that division.
Oh yeah, they've been outstanding, and they've done it without like Netcher Volker. I mean, he's arguably the best bowler in the league. U.S. national team stalwart. So to have him unavailable, and he'll be unavailable soon, I'm sure, with national team duties, to still be putting up those kind of numbers. And obviously, the big two at the top, Unmukt and Shan Jayasuriya, they've just been outstanding. Like you said, I'm also surprised a little bit that they haven't given Jarawala more time at the top of the order. You want to develop that and plan for the future a little bit, especially when you have this kind of advantage in the standings. They can afford to play around a little bit, but again, they've been so solid. I mean, with bat and ball, they're clearly going to be the number one team from this division.
Right, and it's cool to see the differences between these three top teams, how they go about winning their games. Obviously, the Strikers they got a lot of everything, to be honest. They've got very good bowling, very good, especially top order batting, and they kind of do it by committee in the final overs with batting. And then you've got the East Bay Blazers, and with them, it's mostly about their batting. If you ask me, they're all rounders, they're spinning all rounders. They have coming out of their ears. They have three phenomenal all-rounders who are spinners, who have played extremely well. Then you've got the Seattle Thunderbolts, who do it mostly with their incredible bowling attack. You get past like three or four, or about two or three big names on that team before you get to their leading wicket taker. You would think it would be it would be Shadley or Harmeet, but it's not. So it's impressive to see what they've done. The Grizzlies have to be feeling down, and like you said, these Southern California teams. Now, this is a big difference to me between this year and last year. There's really not a single team in this league that can't surprise you. There's the whole league. Last season, there were a couple of teams where you could pretty much put, you save money if you wanted on them losing every time. And this season, I haven't seen it. Fort Lauderdale Lions, Orlando Galaxy, they both have players that, if one guy, Roy Silva goes off, he's going to bowl well. So if he scores 60-70 runs, they could win. They could beat just about anybody. And obviously, we get the same thing down with the Lashings, Surf Riders, Hollywood Master Blasters. Each of these teams have, match winners in them. Chicago Blasters. And that moves us into the Central Division, which to me has been the weirdest division in this league this year. Which I've probably enjoyed watching more than any other division this year, or at least following. We got the Mustangs at the top there with a 99% chance to advance and a 94% chance of getting first place. I mean, let's face it, they don't look like they're going to concede anything, really. You were talking about Sorab being the best bowler in the league, probably in terms of class. With Dallas, I mean, Nosh, how many? Nosh just keeps getting better and better. He comes into games and I love where they're batting him. I love watching him bat because it's like as he's getting his eye in, he's scoring singles and doubles. He runs well. He's a smart cricketer. He's got so many shots at this point. And obviously we know how good of a bowler he is. And then there's the best thing about him, and that's his fielding and his fitness. I think when Nosh comes into bat, we think of him as a bowler, but when he comes into bat, it's can't miss cricket, if you ask me.
He's an underrated bat. I mean, he did well at the national championships last year, I think. I mean, for Dallas at this point, it's almost a catch-22 because has he played himself back onto, the national team? Is he going to be missing time soon? I think they'll be fine, for a few matches without him. But he's been outstanding this year.
Yeah, for some reason, the national team setup seems to have him pegged as a one-day cricketer. But we've seen for the last couple of years how well he's performed as a T20 cricketer. He's got a reputation for working hard, and that surely is showing its fruits this year. It's kind of like he's really arrived. I mean, people need to pay attention to this. They need to pay attention to him because with the bat, he has taken incredible strides over the last few years, and this is kind of like it's all coming together right now.
Yeah, for sure. He's been a joy to watch in the Central.
Yeah, and then we got the Michigan Cricket Stars, who have a 50% chance of finishing in second place, 53% chance of advancing. They have a tiny 4% chance of first place. I don't think anyone's looking at first place in the Central right now. I think everybody's looking at this, or at least everybody. By everybody, I mean the Cricket Stars and the Tigers. And the Cricket Stars are kind of like a striker's light. You know, they have this top order. It's like they tend to go so long into an innings without losing their second wicket.
Yeah.
You know, and they do it by maintaining, you know, a very good strike rate. They hadn't had a single innings where they lost 2 wickets in the power play. So that's their style. They lean on their opening batters, and you know, I think they probably bat a little deeper than that too if we get a chance to see that.
Yeah.
And then we've got the Tigers. Boy, have they been fun to have they been impressive. You know, they've got one of the best performers in the league in their captain, Savage. You know, I joke about how you can't really call him by his first name. You got to call him Savage.
He's a one name man at this point, right?
Right. Yeah. He's been phenomenal for them. Consistent. He's been a great finisher with the bat, but really the value for him is in his bowling. Yeah. So what are your thoughts here? What do you think about this this second place race? And in my opinion, it's the best one. It's the best thing going right now.
This is going to be really fascinating. Like you said, I mean, I'm a Chicago guy, right? So it's clear who I might be pulling for in this. But yeah, like you said, the model does give it a bit of an advantage to Michigan. Like you said, Michigan, one of the most exciting batting teams in minor league cricket, not just this year, but going back to even last year. They score so fast. You know, Ryan Scott at the top setting the table, and but especially this year, all the way down the order, they're just killing the ball. So you know, what's a real shame about this almost is you know, the Michigan Chicago Tigers match that was rained out a couple of weeks ago would have been great if they were able to, you know, decide this a little bit more on the field instead of having rain impact it. But you know, the model loves Michigan. Chicago does have a slight advantage in the standings. They've got 13 points from their 10. Michigan just a couple games behind, really, 9 points from their 8. So but the model really likes the Michigan team. They you know, when they win big. Chicago, you know, they have had a couple close calls. Yeah, they had a tight game against the Blasters. The one game I've been able to be at this year, and you know, that's kind of a weak team. Their margins of victory aren't quite as good. A little bit behind on net run rate. But again, they've got the standings advantage. So really interested to see how this one sorts out. You know, Michigan's got to play Dallas a couple more times. The Tigers have to play Dallas one more time.
Yeah.
Certainly those matches are going to loom large for both teams. I think if either team wins any of those, that gives them an instant leg up, being able to take down the top dog. So, so yeah, we'll see what happens. And yeah, like you said, like Michigan could theoretically still get first. They're certainly going to have to sweep Dallas to do it and have a lot of other results go their way. But yeah, this Michigan Chicago matchup is going to be great. And these are, like you said, these are 2 really fun teams to watch. I think Ryan Scott and Calvin Savage, maybe 2 of the most fun players in minor league cricket, and you know, they're not alone on their teams. So really excited to see how this one sorts out.
Right, and this is a cool thing about this season. Last season, we saw Walter Vakela emerge. You know, the guys that we probably talked about the most, Walter Vakela, Ryan Scott. These were guys that just kind of like came in and they were consistently good. They were fun to watch. They were exciting. They did big things in big moments. And then this year gives us Calvin Savage and Shehan Jayasuriya has taken a whole nother level this year over in the Silicon Valley Strikers. So it's neat. It's great. This is one of the great things about having, you know, another season of a league is, you know, there's new storylines, there's new fun things to follow. But yeah, that Cricket Stars team, it is not going to be an easy road for them. They got the Americans 2 times, no slouch at all. The Americans, unfortunately, don't really have a chance to advance into the playoffs. They have a 2% chance, but they have surprised. They've been much better than they were last year. The big surprise for me has been Houston Hurricanes, but they seem to be coming together now behind their captain, who has been a big time match winner the last couple of weeks. Fantastic. I mean, he's moved himself all the way into second place, I think, in the wickets in the league. So, you know, they're hitting stride just as Michigan's about to play them in 2 weeks' time, play 2 games against them. And then they finish the season against the Mustangs. This is the thing with the Stars. Last year, it went right down to the last game. This year, it looks like it could very well go right down to the last game, especially with considering what Chicago Tigers schedule is. And Chicago's Tigers only have 4 games left. So they'll have an idea of what they need to do. The Tigers actually have a much easier schedule.
Yeah.
They
They get the Blasters for one at least. Yeah.
Yeah, they get the Blasters. They got the Athletics, who seem to not really know what their identity is right now. They're struggling quite a bit. Johnny Kahn can't win every game for you.
Yeah.
And I would like to see these teams like the Lone Star Athletics. The season's lost for you. So go play your young players. Play the guys who are going to be in the setup next year somewhere. It doesn't matter. Winning doesn't matter anymore. You don't want to, obviously you don't want to lay down for a team. Like if they do that, the Tigers' path becomes much easier. But I mean, on paper at least, but these young players are the ones motivated to play. You want to put, the model doesn't take into account momentum, and it looks like to me, Michigan's got a lot rougher of a road. They got to beat a team with momentum, with Houston Hurricanes, who seem to have a good captain, but even though they're losing, they seem to have at least a good captain. And that goes a long way. It's going to be great. I think it's going to come right down to the last game in a couple of these divisions.
It's an interesting division. I'm glad you touched on Houston and Lone Star, and we know St. Louis has quality too. It's a little bit similar, in some ways to the East. Maybe unfortunately the Blasters aside. I think any team. I know Lone Star struggle, but they've got Locks back, and
right.
The model actually likes Lone Star, and let's not forget Lone Star and Houston were the playoff teams last year. So no easy path, but certainly the Tigers with the scoreboard advantage, or the standings advantage, and a game against the Blasters left. We'll see how it goes, but again, this is going to be a really tasty end of the season, and hey, I'm glad again we get to see new blood in the playoffs. No matter what happens, we're almost certainly going to get two new teams that weren't in there last year. So
absolutely
excited to see how they fare.
Yeah, me too. And we've got the Tigers. The Tigers are going to have to finish with more wins than Michigan, it looks like, based on the net run rate difference. So that factors into it too. They're going to have to do one better than Michigan.
Michigan's not a team to get blown out, so I don't think that's going to fall too much.
Right. I think, and also, the Blasters are the Blasters haven't been, I wouldn't call them a good team, but they have put up a fight against some really good teams recently.
I mean, I was on the boundary rope when Savage got 34 off and over against the Blasters. If that hadn't happened, the Blasters win that match. I mean, it was like an 8 or 9 run match. So let's not write them off. I mean, they can play spoiler. I think that's the last match of the season for the Tigers. So
and also the game where Ryan Scott scored 90, they had a 103 run partnership, I believe, in that game. The Blasters did. You can't count on beating them easily. Tom, it's been awesome talking to you, as it always is. I really appreciate you giving me your time. We've been chatting for a while now. So but thank you so much for your time. I know we'll be chatting a lot more. We're coming right down to the stretch. Team here that I'm on commentary for, Morrisville Raptors, has 9 games to play in 3 weeks.
Good luck.
It's going to be a whirlwind. We got a lot of exciting things coming up. We got Philadelphia having a festival this weekend. Lots of great stuff going on, and you and I will be paying close attention to it. So I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
For sure. It was a pleasure as always, Nate. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.